The Ghana National Association of Private Schools has bemoaned government's failure to rope in private schools in the first ever national standardized test. The test, which was organized just last week for over 470,000 pupils, sought to assess the knowledge, skills, values, as well as attitude of candidates in line with the new pre-tertiary education curriculum. Government says the results of the assessment will help the ministry to develop policies and interventions for basic schools across the country. But the Ghana National Association of Private Schools says government cannot, on the basis of a one-sided assessment, initiate interventions for all basic schools. Simply put, they want in on the national cake. Well, joining me now in the studio, General Secretary of the Ghana National Association of Private Schools, Justice King Itzel, and he's with me in the studio. Good to see you, Justice. Justice, what exactly are your concerns? Because I remember the minister said they were willing to bring in private schools if they are interested.
Okay, the question actually is not if. We should understand that education is important, however we look at it. And there are stages, ages by which you must make certain attainments.
Okay.
If you miss it, there's a gap.
Okay. Because
of the way our neuroscience and brain develops. So 0 to 5, there are things you're supposed to do, to 7. By 12, most of the things must be complete. So anytime you miss that, there's a problem. Now with the school system, like we are doing now, this is an assessment of the learning. So at the end of the period, you want to see what are the children, what do they know, what do they understand, what can they do. You're using that as a basis to do some policy intervention and be able to see how we can improve upon the system. We also need to understand that private sector schools in the basic level are about a third of the numbers. So if you're going to sample, let's say you're going to do, this was supposed to run at various levels, at basic 2, 4, 6, 8, the grade levels. But you're doing for basic 4. We should then include the basic 4 also private sector to understand what is happening both in public and private. So when you're making a decision, representative of what is on the ground. Interestingly enough, before the examination, they are taking data from schools, public and private, leading to this examination. So private schools, children were also expecting that they will be part of the process and preparing, so we can know the outcome of this assessment to help us know how to set new goals and new pathways for the children. We should be able to know their attainment and look at what progress they can make. And so finally we waited. Schools have to wait for 1 more week as the instruction was given that basic 4 should stay on for a week. We did that. Only to be told that private schools are not part of the process. We think that it's not the target should not be against private schools. It's about the children in the schools, the Ghanaian children. And any attempt to discriminate children of private schools, I think will be unfair. It's not going to help the country because we don't know even where the critical masses are. There might be some child, public or private, who will be having that next idea that's going to transform the world. So when you discriminate, these are the things that happen. It affects everybody. And GNAPS feel that this is very much unfair.
Well, the exams has already been conducted. What do you seek government to do, or what exactly do you want from government? Okay,
so the exam is a process. The examination, the finish marking, and interpret the results. They're supposed to be made transparent. Parents must know what's happening. Educators must know what's happening. The children must know what is happening. Okay. Now the question is, what kind of results are they going to bring out? Will it be results of public schools against what? Because you look at various parameters in trying to analyze some of these things. Gender, boys, girls, how are we doing? Even looking at something like when you're taking the enrollment, are you seeing whether is it a certain age? Maybe by basic 4, for example, you are supposed to have a certain age when you attain that point. Some children get there before, some get after. What has that got to do with that? Public, private, you need to look at all that. So if you are taking private schools out, we think that the kind of outcome, the results that will be given out, might not reflect exactly what is happening in the education sector.
Have you engaged government on this?
We are arranged to meet the minister severally, went to the ministry based on their time, and for meeting, we just go and disappoint as just to talk about some of these things. In fact, it's interesting that this is not the only thing they're trying to do, but if you look at our children after BEC, going to SSAC, there's another discrimination going on there. What 30% of the 100% placement, 30% is set aside again for only public schools. I don't know where you're getting the idea from, that when you attend private school, it means that you are from a better background. No, it's a decision, it depends on people's belief. For some parents, they don't have the money, but they'll do anything to give their children the best of education. Yeah. Wherever they find the best, they'll go in there. So to assume that being in private schools therefore means that you are better off, I mean, I don't know where the argument is coming from. But
isn't it obvious that people who attend private school are better off?
Our schools are not the international school system. Ghana has very school owners, but basically on the local, we do the national curriculum. Okay. There are schools that are charging as low as 1 cedi a day.
Really?
Yes.
Private schools?
Yes, I'm telling you.
Okay.
I'm telling you. There are schools that are being supported by some NGO to be able to run. The idea actually is that how can we ensure that our children are learning? That's what they are doing. Okay, so based on what they are doing, the sacrifices, we see volunteers coming to help the children to learn, to read, and do other things. If they are doing those and they are getting parents who feel that, I'm getting the results, my child is not able to read, but having gone to so and so school is able to do reading, and so they go to the school, does not therefore mean that the person is well off. I know people who are well off, whose children are in public sector school. It has to do with what your values and beliefs are and what plans you have towards your children. So that notion actually must be discarded. It doesn't reflect the reality.
Well, thankfully, spokesperson of the Ministry of Education, Kwesi Kwarteng, has joined us via Zoom. I'm grateful for your time, Kwesi Kwarteng.
Hey, Aisha. Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing well. First, I'd like you to share with us the outcome of the standardized test.
Okay, very well. And a very good evening to you once again. Let me say that even though this is a maiden exams, of course, of the national standardized test, let me say that, I mean, in the past, we've had such exams, or, I mean, similar exams. If you look at the early grade reading assessment, for instance, or the early grade mathematics assessment, which was conducted for our students in class 4 initially. I mean, we've had similar exams, just that with what we just did on the 17th of December, is taking that census nature, and I mean, we've been able to populate it. And so initially, if you look at the EGRA or the EGMA, for instance, you had the exams being conducted for about just 500 schools. This time around, we are looking at over 15,000 schools, almost 16,000 schools, which translates into over 51,000 students, almost 562,000 students. Of course, I mean, the exams was conducted on the 17th of December. Initially, there was some delay in the start, but generally, around 11 a.m., all the exam centers, almost all of them, over the 2,600 exam centers, we had students writing the exams. But of course, we do acknowledge that the delay was a bit of a hitch, but generally the exams was successful. And of course, I'm sure it's the more reason why our friends in the private school are saying that next time we should include them. I mean,
what went into the selection of schools to participate in this exams?
Yes, so even if you look at the nature of the exams, of course, from the education strategic plan, we are having the exams, of course, I mean, scheduled for students in class 2, class 4, and class 6. And then, I mean, the initial proposal was to start with the public schools. Of course, if you had listened to the Minister of Education when he met the press, I mean, during the announcement of the NST, which is the National Standardized Test, the question was posed to him about whether or not they were going to include the private schools. And of course, I mean, we said that the conduct of the examination and the whole process has never been an event. It's a process. And there's a more reason why we do the general plans for class 2, class 4, class 6. But this time around, we thought it wise to begin with the class 4 students. And so even with the government schools, the public schools, we're not even able to more or less start with all of them. But subsequently, there are plans to enroll our friends also from the public school. But generally, let us admit the reality. If you look at researches and studies that has been done by the World Bank, of course, currently and in the past. If you look at even somewhere in 2015, a research that was done on learning proficiency, for instance, the World Bank, made it clear that over 88% of our students cannot read and write or cannot even do numeracy, as compared to if you go to jurisdictions like Europe, which is around 14%. If you look at the data and the statistics from those times in 2015 when we were doing the early grade reading assessment, early grade mathematics assessment, for instance, only 2% of our students could read and write. And that was a learning poverty that really demonstrated a gap. And so in a response to this, the Minister for Education, the Honorable Dr. Yaduchim, is saying that no, we have to conduct an exams of such a nature so that we'll be able to identify the learning gaps based on the data that we generate. Of course, are able to identify the learning gaps and then propose solutions to it or provide an intervention to it. And if you look at it, it's part of the entire long plan of education, which fits into our education strategic plan, which seeks to reform our educations and transform our education ultimately. Of course, in this 21st century, we are looking at training students who are assertive, who are critical thinkers, who are problem solvers.
So are there plans, Kwesi, are there plans to include the private sector or the private schools in the next exams?
Yeah, Aisha, that's why I said that during the presser, a question was posed to that effect. And of course, the minister was saying that, yes, next year, for instance, the private sector will be included. Because that's why I said that even if you look at education strategic plans, which mandates us to conduct these exams, of course, as part of the general steps to transform our education, the national standardized test is scheduled to be written by students in class 2, class 4, and class 6. But of course, we began with those in class 4, with the hope subsequently we'll be doing that of class 2 and class 6. So yes, the plan includes our friends in the private schools.
Does that resolve your issue?
Yes, I'm still wondering. Yes, he's trying very hard. Quant is trying very hard to explain government's position. When you talk and say the minister decides, the minister's role actually is to be there to protect other children's rights, not only public children. And so when you say minister decide, the other stakeholders in education lead them out. Minister decide. How do you develop policy and then take key policy stakeholders out, and then the decision is just only one-sided? How can you do that?
How do you think the ministry should handle this?
No, we should all come to an understanding as to what we were doing, so that even when they began and in trying to collect data towards this examination, they shouldn't have at that point in time asked schools to also provide data. Okay. That's when they cite their mind that, we're part of the whole process.
Okay, so you want to be part of the process.
Of course, we should be part of the process.
Mr. Kwarteng, is this something that you are considering?
Let me say that I am not ready for a banter. I speak for the Ministry of Education and I speak the position of the ministry.
What is the position of the ministry on this?
I'm landed. I am not sure the comments as the minister decides and what I view is important here, especially within the context of the conversation that we are having. The reference was or to a question that was posed there, of which the Minister for Education made it clear that plans are far advanced for our friends from the private institutions to also take the exams, hopefully next year. I'm not sure it's about the minister having the prerogative to make a decision A, B, or C. Of course, if you listen to the premise of my argument, I said everything has been provided in our education strategic plan as part of the reforms. And indeed, genuinely, Aisha, yes, if you want to, it is not necessarily to suggest that, students in our private schools probably do not need any form of acceleration. Indeed, even if you come to the private school, public schools, for instance, the data, one of the things that we are going to use the data for is to analyze and see those students that are also performing so that we're able to provide interventions for acceleration. Just like we're able to be providing interventions for students that are not performing well. And so, yes, even if the private schools, they are seemingly doing well, like you said, they are all Ghanaians. At some point, we may also have to extend our scope and also help them with regards to assessing them.
So it is something that will happen next year. You are including them.
Yes. The whole point about they are being discriminated and the minister, I don't think is relevant within the context of the conversation that we are having. Indeed, even with the public schools, if we look at the implementation plan that was developed by NACA, even though the entire education strategic plan postulates that you have the exams to be conducted for students in class 2, class 4, class 6, the implementation plan actually said that we should begin with students from class 4.
Okay.
And so I'm sure when we take...
All right, so Kwesi Kwarteng is the spokesperson for the Education Ministry, and he says it's clearly that they will include the private schools. How do you intend to ensure it happens next year?
Yeah, so
briefly for me.
Yes, we as stakeholders, we all have to ensure that anything we're doing, we consider every child, we get everybody involved. And so we'll continue like we are doing. We advocate for private sector students to also be considered. The minister is a minister for all the education sectors and not just for public schools. When we understand that, I think we're able to move forward and make some progress.
Justice King Asel, he's the General Secretary for the Ghana National Association of Private Schools. I'm grateful for your time this afternoon.